The third part is execution of the plan. So we've got Lizette up the front, who's leading? Thank you. Mafee, this is not bribery, councillors. Yeah. Just be very clear. It looks like it's bribery, but it's not. It's also to say thanks to the ones who have stayed the day with us. So, I'm good.
I hope this is being taped so that other members of the staff can see them.
See that we need chocolate. No, excellent. So Lizette will lead us off. I have said to the staff I don't want more than a 10-minute presentation because really it's over for councillors to ask questions, and 10 minutes in we will stop the presenters to pass over to questions. Lizette.
Thank you. Lizette, and if I could get you to give us a bit of an introduction with the others that are there in front of you. Thank you.
Sure thing. So thank you. Today with us we have Nicola and Lana from GMD Consultants, who both have a long history in spatial planning knowledge and expertise, in particular with Futureproof, our growth partnership here in the Waikato, and also our cousin Smart Growth in the Bay of Plenty, so cousin growth partnership to Futureproof. And they've been giving us a hand with the second part of this first phase of our thinking regarding regional spatial strategy, and that is the framework for how we're going to do this thing. So if we could move to the next slide, please. Thanks. Just a brief intention. We will obviously spend most time in workshop discussion, but we'll zoom through some slides as a visual reminder. And if we could move to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the project for this regional strategic spatial thinking is in 3 parts, and this inventory is the second half of that first part, or the middle part of that diagram there. Sorry, the framework is. We're getting ourselves confused between inventories and frameworks at the moment, but you have seen the inventory, and now we're on to the framework.
Sorry, Lizette, if I can just interrupt. So councillors, this was in your workshop pack, and you can follow Lizette along from page 95.
Thank you. And then in terms of context on the next slide, you will be familiar that the government has made directions now, although they're not in a huge amount of detail, on resource management reform, and indicating that regional spatial plans will be present and they will focus on certain things. And our inventory work has showed that there's a comprehensive set of information that we can use to work towards best outcomes for the Waikato region. To the next slide, please. So the purpose of the framework part of this project is as a guiding document to how do we move forward with working with one another towards a regional spatial strategy, or plan as they're now being named in central government direction. And I'll move on to, so we're taking turns with a few of the slides so you don't have to listen to me constantly, and Lana's just going to do the next couple.
Yeah.
Just one
like
time.
You need the red light on. Yep.
Yeah.
And just pull it nice and close to yourself. That red light's hasn't stayed on.
Side.
That's it.
That's it. Thank you. Kia ora. So yes, this is just the framework principles that we've been developing. So we decided that the RSS framework needed a common base of understanding. So there's a few more details in the report that was given to you around what these principles comply with. But it is not intended that these principles are the objectives or principles of the RSS itself. It's just the framework that it underpins. Next slide. So this is just a question for, I think, the end, to just keep in mind whether we've covered all of the aspects that you think need covering. Again, there's a few more details in the report regarding those principles.
Kia ora. In terms of the proposed approach, we just wanted to highlight that even though we're still waiting on the details of what resource management reform is going to look like, there are advantages to us getting ready. We've already seen the benefit of forward thinking with this project. We started out thinking we were going to prepare a regional spatial strategy. that went away, but we decided to keep going, and now we have to do a regional spatial plan, and we're in a good place with an inventory already prepared. Next slide, please. And so that does put us in a good position to advocate for our region because we've already been thinking about it. So the framework recognises that we do need to have that bit of flexibility because we don't know all the details of what our regional spatial plan will look like. But the approach sort of sets out that we're going to use the best available information and best practice approach to prepare the strategy. And then next slide is another question for the end.
If I could just make a comment here. I think the fact that Lizette and Miffy have kind of shared some of this information with others in the sector, and some and ladies, correct me if I'm totally fake newsing this, but Ministry for the Environment and MHUD. So to basically say, hey, this is what they're doing. The feedback that I've heard is great that one, council made provision in the LTP for us to carry on, and that the inventory is being used by others as a way to start their project. So just wanted to give you some confidence that we're not charging ahead of the rest of the sector, but people are looking to us and the team to a degree to do some of that thought leadership of puddling our way through it. We know, as Miffy said, that we've got, we started this 2 years ago, things have kind of flipped on their head a bit, and we know that with the legislation coming, we'll have to pitch and sway. So I guess just coming back to the same comment I made, Ben, during committee meeting, this thing is iterative, as we go along. So there will be opportunities as things change, other things come to the top, as you said, to kind of put those in the slipstream.
Okay.
I think that's working. So this just sets out the project pathway that we've prepared as part of that framework with the team. Sorry that it's really hard to read, but it's basically setting out that you have a commencement phase that would start this year. Next year, you'd get into more of the technical information, and by that point, we should have legislation. So there'll be a lot more clarity around what's required. And then you move into, in 2027, the actual drafting of the document and all of the formal consultation. You'd obviously do a lot of engagement before that. And hearings, whatever else is required. And then we have noted in that table that there is actually a phase 8, which is, I think they're talking about a coordination document, which is really like an implementation plan. Go to the next slide. Yeah, that's...
Sorry, ladies, this is the start of the new reform that's coming through. We know there's going to be a combined one plan. I'll probably jump ahead, but there's a combined one plan for the region, and the spatial plan is intended to be kind of the parent document. Quite what that looks like in terms of whether we get 10.5 TAs and just bung a staple through their district plan, or we go through a process, remains to be seen. But the spatial plan is the foundation for every subsequent planning document of either ours or the territorial authorities.
Ben, you want to raise
just a
something?
question on that. You mentioned hearings. So this is the plan that's going to have hearings. It means it's a very significant document. It's not just a plan as such.
Indeed. Yes, it's intended that there is an independent hearings panel that considers the plan, and then there's still some detail to be worked through as to whether and how a plan is then endorsed or adopted by the partner councils. So actually that's in the next slide about governance.
Oh, and come to government, but you're essentially saying this oversees or overlaps above the regional plan. Regional
Yes.
policy statement, this is the
I'll say yes with what information we know at the moment.
Okay.
It will, but until we see the legislation. That being said, that is a component of this plan. There may be other things that sit to the side of our legislative responsibility that council collectively says we may need in the plan as well.
And to clarify, there will be no more regional policy statements. So this will partly replace a regional policy statement. we have some concerns about where objectives and policies might then live in the new system.
Chris?
I was really just trying to pick up, I don't know whether you want us to answer these questions now or at the end, but
And
at the end.
happy, yeah,
It's just,
if we may.
I want to pick up on a point Tracy made then.
Thank you. Okay, not very many more to go. So this is governance structures. So it may be an area of interest for you. We have in the framework we've considered or put forward types of governance that currently exists, or it may be that a new structure is envisaged for considering regional spatial plans. And then in terms of the next slide, how we might split things as well that makes sense into communities of interest. It could be geographically, or it could be by key subject areas, or it could be through corridors of interest. So there are a number of options for that as well. So we're very interested in your thoughts on those. So the next slide has the questions about those. And then we'll move on to structure and content.
Me again. So basically, the spatial nature of the RSS means that it will be quite map and data intensive. I'm not going to go through all those points on the slide, but essentially, we envision it to be an online interactive document and a supporting report that is fully integrated with the mapping platform. We are still awaiting guidance from central government on this aspect, and it's possible that there may be a standardized template provided by central government. It's kind of one of the unknowns at the moment, but we do envision it to be quite an online-based interactive mapping heavy document. Slide. And then there's just the accompanying question on that one. Next slide.
Then in terms of key stakeholders, this is a diagram that you have provided us feedback on, which we acknowledge it is a starter. But to go into more detail on the next slide, we've tested the framework approach so far with territorial authorities via a staff reference group and central government in neighbouring regions. And we've also asked iwi how they would like to participate with us or partnership with us to create further work towards regional spatial planning. And we will further engage on this draft framework over the next few months as well. Looking forward to the next slide, we'll need a more comprehensive communications and engagement plan. So we do cover and include everyone that you have mentioned to us as you've been reviewing the earlier diagram. And these are the recommendations in terms of that comprehensive communications and engagement strategy. So the relevant questions related to that area are up on the screen now, and then over to Miffy.
We have had a closer look at those gaps that we identified in the inventory document, and we've tried to further prioritise them and sort of put a bit of a value guesstimate around them. So that is included as attachment 2 to the report. So some of that work can get underway now. Some of the work needs to wait for other things to proceed, such as CCOs for water to be formed, and some of them will be part of the strategy development. So the question we're asking on this one is just around whether you agree with that further prioritisation. And over to Lana. Nicola, sorry.
Yeah, I think this might be the last slide. So this just sets out the next steps, just acknowledging that the inventory and the framework complete stage 1, but the framework's still to be discussed with local authorities, iwi and central government and other stakeholders in more detail, and that we've all recommended that the preparatory work for stage 2 that starts this year. So that's around things like looking at governance structures, sort of getting some of the work underway around the gaps that have been identified and getting a project plan and a comms plan in place for the RSS. But we have acknowledged there that the really detailed work should probably wait until next year once that legislation comes out.
Look, councillors, we know that's a lot of information at the end of a pretty chunky day today, and we've lost some along the way and got Stu along the way. So there's a lot of information in there. As I said, it will be coming to council next week. It is the first rather comprehensive draft that the team have put together. So if there is a want for a further workshop to go through and pick at it in more detail, we're more than happy to have that. But I think what the team finished on there in terms of we'll begin work in earnest, but there is probably, to quote Noel, a need for us to bring our new council along on the journey. We may have some faces around the table who have come thus far, but there might be some that are new. It's going to be a fairly seminal document for the next triennium, so I think it's very important that we, as part of the council induction, highlight its importance and make sure that our new council has an ability to shape and influence as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Tracy. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, do I agree with the approach? Well, to be quite honest, no, I don't, because I always like to know where we're trying to end up. I like to know what the target is, and the target is unknown because legislation's unknown, as Tracy quite rightly pointed out. So I just hope we're not, there's a lot of work gone into this and it's a good framework, but I just hope it doesn't require too much change because that's costs people money. So I don't like seeing money wasted. Timelines appear reasonable to me, but what I don't understand is quite how Hamilton City fits into your regional framework, because Hamilton City is the biggest single contributor of rates by a significant, massive margin. It just seemed to fall out of the equation when it comes to this sort of planning. To me, it would have Hamilton City justifies a separate grouping on its own, because otherwise you're not going to get the commitment and the buy-in. You need the focus groups need to be in the city rather than spread around. That's just my view. Ruth?
Just wondered whether anybody wanted to respond to that, because a significant portion of your life, Miffy, responding to Hamilton City and some of what comes there. But Chris, are you particularly talking about the voices of Hamilton City and how they get to influence? Thank you. Yep, thank you. Yep.
Would you like me to comment?
Please.
Yes, okay. So, Hamilton City are a part of Future Proof, and so that plans for that wider Hamilton area, acknowledging that Hamilton is quite a tight local government boundary, and they are greatly influenced by their surrounding districts. So that's recognised in Future Proof, and that's how we plan. So try and take a bit more of a borderless approach. And that's becoming even more apparent with Fast Track, with all those developments around the fringe. So that is a long-standing relationship and arrangement, and there is momentum there, and there doesn't seem to be any desire from Hamilton to pull away from that. But you are right that we will need to have a lot more focused stakeholder engagement within Hamilton City, given the population here. But they are, I guess there's a risk, particularly with national direction. They do have very much a focus on urban environments, and we need to make sure that we are giving a whole of our region the same level of attention.
Make sure we're getting bang for our bucks in terms of the rates contribution. I look at the Natural Heritage Fund. We're contributing 85% of it, and we get nothing back. And I want to see that change.
Getting tooey.
Yeah. Keeping an eye on your bets.
If I can just make one comment. I hear what you're saying. It's just what is the art of the possible. We're wanting to include all our rural landowners as well, as much as we possibly can as part of this. So I guess it's just giving people the opportunities to contribute and making sure that they're meaningful, and in a way where we can recognise Hamilton, or we could recognise Te Aroha or our rural area, but knitting it together at that regional level is really what I understand the government's going to want from us. But yeah, we just have to be smart around how we do that engagement in a way that actually gets people in. So I'm mindful of that. We can run fantastic engagement, but only have one person through the door or one person making a comment. So we'll be looking for your good selves, those who'll be back to help us understand what successful engagement looks like for your constituents.
Thank you, Tracy. Jen.
Thanks. If I get in early as I have to run soon, I'll only be online. It's always harder to speak online. I actually really agree with Chris there, and I would like us to have a think about how we can be more flexible in how we spend our time talking to the TAs in particular, because in transport it comes up all the time. We should be spending a hell of a lot more time with them on the topic of the buses, for example, because 80% of the buses are in that area. I think we could get around keep future-proof for all those conversations, but why not have an additional interspersed Hamilton focus, for example? It is a huge part of our population. Let's maybe think about being proportional to that rather than proportional to the geography, as we often are, and often there's good reasons for it. I think also of Matamata Piako District Council, because when I look at the subgroupings, I've never known where to put that one. It's obviously already in future-proof, but that's not to say they don't want to be part of the conversations that go into Hauraki and TCDC, because spatial planning-wise, they make so much sense, especially with the adaptation projects coming up. And then there's no reason why they might not want to be involved in the South Waikato Taupo area. I would really think about maybe splitting the Otahonga district and Waitomo from Southern into their own, because the West and East is quite different, and maybe they're two shorter meetings rather than one long one for the Southern. But I just really remember the learning from the Waikato plan about how it's so hard to engage people from Raglan and Taupo at the same meeting. And that also got me thinking about whether there is a place for another level down under those. The community panels that we've used, say in the Wharekawa project, is there something there, or is there a way that you can engage the community at one lower level? But I'm not quite sure what that looks like yet. Just a heads up to think about the flexibility of these areas, as well as we just had that conversation about areas of interest in our JMAs versus the JMA boundaries. So considering none of these boundaries make sense anyway with any other boundaries, just give some thought to that early on. When we had the zero emission bus discussion, I'm again really concerned about the lack of information that we can get sometimes from the lines providers. And I know you've got utility providers on your list, but I'm just looking forward to seeing how we crack that. Because energy in a spatial plan, I think, is one of the higher up parts that we need to get right. And then I see we mentioned resilience in the paper, and I just would still challenge that we don't just think about climate change and resilience, but with all the geopolitical stuff going on, that it really does cover off the energy security, food security, water security stuff. But I think that might be repeating myself. And the other part where I saw commons mentioned, or I suppose the Waikato Progress Indicator on social cohesion is still, and everywhere, tracking in the wrong direction. I noticed it was only mentioned really in regards to public spaces and low socioeconomic kind of groupings. I'd like it to be more for everyone rather than just that. And then on bordering regional councils, while we haven't done it a lot, it'd be really good to include Manawatu, Whanganui and Hawke's Bay in that, just to start a new path there. Yeah, and while the Mayoral Forum can be still useful for that coordination and discussion, I do worry about its lack of transparency. So still really open to see what the bringing it together as a whole looks like. And I will ask the question sometime about can a spatial planning committee have other statutory committees be forms of reference be part of it? For example, can the Regional Transport Committee be a segment of the tour of a joint committee? It's just something to think about, so we don't end up with a crazy number of committees. And the very last point there was central government is mentioned with all the entities, the more operational entities, but might need to give some thought to how we might engage all the parliamentary parties in this process. Because for 3 years, it's easier to talk to half of them. And for the next 3 years, it's easier to talk to the other 3. But maybe over time, we could really build that relationship between elected members so that they're always aware of our work. Leave it there. Thanks.
Thanks, Jen. Ben?
Just a question for Tracy to begin with. We're replacing our regional policy statement by 2027, is that right?
Nope.
Replacing our regional plan? What are we, is something changing before 2027? What's that?
So we have present statutory responsibilities to replace all our operative plans within 10 years.
Yep.
We have been about 17 years overdue with our coastal plan.
Yep.
Varying years overdue with our regional plan. Different modules, we're overdue with our land and geothermal module. We're doing our freshwater module. We have an RPS that will be 10 years old from its operative date next year. And so we have a statutory responsibility to replace it. Now, again, Chris Hughes is sitting on the shoulder and many other councillors saying, don't be a slave to those 10-year timelines when you know things are going to change. So we've got some, and I'm presently putting together a paper for council, probably won't be July, will likely be August, which is all our policy programs and all our strategies and train, and what of the 23 different national instruments that are presently being changed and how that impacts, which ones we have clarity of certainty on, which ones are a bit more opaque, and therefore where shall we spend ratepayers' money? Because that's a question that you should be asking me if you haven't already. And working through that. So we've got also Lizette and Miffy's team are responsible for doing what's called a Section 35 effectiveness review of the RPS and spending some money to do that. Why would we do that when we know, okay, there's a statute that requires it, but we also know that the RPS might change? So the answer to your question is yes and no in equal regards.
But what it does mean is this regional strategy plan, spatial plan is going to replace that to some extent. And so I wasn't aware that the draft we've seen is going to be so important, or this stuff is so important.
Well, it is, but it's also the statute we know is going to be heavily focused on infrastructure and transport. There's a bunch of other stuff that happens that we need to fit in. Jen talked about energy. Now, the government's tootling through an energy strategy or getting more excited about geothermal, less excited about traditional energy. So for us, it's let's not just stick to the one or two things. We've got to bed that in, but there are other things that we need to incorporate. So we've got statute coming down that's going to say, here's the suite of things we want. We understand that there is also, and any other things that might be important, that kind of marriage. But it will, as Miffy and Lizette said, it will replace the RPS, but there's still some entrails left of the RPS that we need to find a home for as well.
And so it seemed to me one of the most important questions here is the governance one and how you're going to do that. How do we do that for the RPS?
So the RPS was ours, section 70, 71, the RMA says you shall make an RPS and you shall do that regional council. We haven't seen the whites of the eyes of the legislation yet around governance. So what the team are doing is some thinking, but that thinking might get done for us.
So, I mean, that's almost option 2. Regional councils sign off with recommendations from local authorities.
Yeah, maybe. And with the RPS, while it was our responsibility, we did actually set up a network with our TAs. Just coming back to the Hamilton question, and doing this work that the team have put together, Hamilton chose not to be part of it. every other TA, when we said we want your perspectives, were there.
Yeah.
Hamilton said, no, it's not important, we'll wait till the next phase.
Yeah.
So
I guess in conclusion, this spatial strategy is going to be really important. So it would be useful to be able to go through this in more detail rather than at 3 o'clock on the day before a holiday. So
this was the workshop slot we were given
Yeah.
in the calendar, but
Yeah.
I do understand that, but at least you've got the kernels of it out there so you can start thinking.
just one question. When Chris is sitting on your shoulder, is he smiling or frowning?
He's always smiling.
Thank you, Chris.
I'll come to you online, Bruce.
Thank you, Warren. Put my camera on, but respond directly to Councillor Hughes's last statement. Councillor Hughes told us we get nothing back from our Natural Heritage Fund and other stuff. Well, first of all, I couldn't imagine a more negative thing for a councillor to say. Second of all, of course, factually, it's completely wrong. The main things we get back include a multiplier effect. For every dollar we invest, the community invests at least $5 of theirs, either in time or additional expenses, in order to support us in what we're doing to assist in improving our environmental outcomes. What we get back is environmental outcomes that include better water, better air, better biodiversity, and improved resilience of our ecosystems. For Councillor Hughes to say that we get nothing back is simply incomprehensible and shows that he clearly has a bad case of midwinter blues. So that's my comment on the topic. Chris, I'm happy at any time to meet with you to explain to you what we get back for our expenditure, for our investment on our natural heritage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bruce. Maybe the two of you can sit in a paddock tonight looking for Matariki and have that discussion, but Chris.
Bruce, I'm looking forward to that discussion because I know your version of economics is totally different to mine, so that's fine. But my question now is for Tracy, and you've sort of thrown me off where I was going on this, but that's all right, I'll live with it. Tracy, under the new, if I understand things correctly, and we haven't seen the final bill yet, but the regulatory standards bill is going to require one, if you bring something new in, then you've got to get rid of two of the others. So how does this fit? Which two are we going to get rid of?
Yeah, as I said this morning, the rhetorical conversation around that isn't a bring in one, get rid of two. It's make sure the one you bring in isn't adding on top of other things. I guess that was part of our submission to the regulatory standards bill. It's great if you want to put in a, what's one I can think of, toilets on camping grounds and the regulations around that. That's me in a previous life having to deal with those. If you're bringing that in, what are you going to remove? That's nice and binary. If you start saying, okay, you've got to put in a regional spatial plan and take something out, it's not just related to a single topic. So that was part of our submission on the bill. What does this actually look like in practice? Does this bill apply to resource management plans, or does it just apply to single focused regulation? I don't know, Chris. I really don't know how it's going to apply in this respect. What we do have is the virtue of Section 32 of the RMA, which always asks us to do a cost benefit analysis to bring anything in. We need to do that better than we have done in the past, but it shouldn't be new for us to do this. But yeah, the answer is I don't know. There's too many movable bits that are all a bit grey at the moment. And I'm not. So, yeah.
Thanks for that, Tracy. Just one last thing for me. I don't think there are any further questions,
Yeah,
but just in the
comment.
Hey, I'm at the top of the table here. Ben, do you want to?
Oh, just a comment in terms of what Chris was saying there about regulatory standards bill. Those of us who are old enough can remember Geoffrey Palmer hunting quangos. 50 of them, I think he got rid of.
Excellent. Thanks for that input. Just in the project pathway and timelines, there's a set up project office and recruit staff to support the process. Where's that sitting?
Are you thinking in terms of this project?
Yeah,
or
well, it's on, yeah,
what's envisaged by the legislation?
it's on page 5 of this workshop paper and that, projects and timelines, pathways and timelines. It's for December onwards. I just went, what's set up a project office?
So a project office means that we're going to need a project manager, and that project manager is going to need some assistance to drive this project. We in this organisation and commonly in local government think that we can deliver our day jobs and also manage projects, and we can't, and we fail. So the whole purpose of that is to be honest, and we were honest in the LTP business case that we would need that staffing. At this stage, it's identified as something we need to do. We haven't turned our minds to it at this right now, but we've foreshadowed it, and of course we will wait to do that until we've got a bit more clarity around what we're doing. And if the government comes out with some legislation that says it needs to be this big and we've only sized this big, then we have to come back to council for a conversation.
Thank you for that clarity. Are there any other questions before we wrap up for the day? No, that's it. So thank you very much, ladies, for your presentation today. I think we've scratched the surface in the framework space.
And thanks for the chocolate muffy, because it definitely injected a bit of energy into the afternoon.
Yeah. Probably kept 3 more councillors in the room, to be quite honest. But, so thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for hanging around, councillors, and enjoy your long weekend. And we'll see you next week.